Hi all and welcome to Promethean Bryce. This is going to be another commentary video based on one of the models I've done. On this one in particular, as you can see in the background from the reference, I'm doing Rias Gremory from School DxD. Just a cool character, quite a popular character, and a good test for skill level. So as always, I'm just going to go over what I did, when I did it, why I did it, and like I said, it's not meant to be used as a full tutorial, but you can get a general idea of things. If you do want to see a proper tutorial by me, I do have a playlist of tutorials where I've done basically what you see going on in here in a bit more detail. So go over and watch that if you want to watch a tutorial. But for here, we'll just get straight into it. So first off, as always, we've put the reference in at the front and side. Never worry about the 3/4 or anything else like that because you don't really need to. So yeah, as long as you have the front and the side, you have something to sort of go with. It just keeps you don't have to have reference if you don't need it in terms of in the actual software itself, but it just helps you get those sizes correct. And I like to try and get it as much as I can. Sometimes, like I said, you can't find the reference or you'll have to make your own. But like I said, just use what you can. And if you have to make your own, make your own. If you have to use your sort of imagination and initiative, just do that instead. But like I said, you've put that in there. What I always do is I put that there and then I stick a sphere in and I remesh the sphere by a factor of about 0.8 just to get it workable and low poly enough to keep the processing down and to get the basic shapes in. I'll place one of them to the side, as you can see, where I copy and paste it over and then put it over the particular section. So I'll cut each character into parts and then build it up as I go along. So yeah, you just put one of them to the side. It speeds up workflow and it just makes things a lot more simple and easier. And then you're just doing all of that sort of basic shape from head, neck, body, both up and bottom, legs, feet, and if you've got toes, you would do your toe bits. But say you might have, most characters probably won't have toes. And then your fingers, which will always be there, so you'll need to do them. And again, you're just getting those basic shapes out. Try and keep them flat, head on at first. We'll go into complex shapes sort of later, which is why I do these in the first place. I do two versions. The animation version, which will be in a T-pose. And then I'll save out the parts and do a pose version, which I'll usually put on my buy me a coffee if you want to go buy them later. Because I do them for people to say print off and that. And if you want, some of them I will put the animation version up for purchase, but I'll have to see about this one. If it's there, obviously you can check it out. If it's not there, I haven't felt it's been good enough to give out. But I do have a stripperella that's actually has the animation version there if you want to purchase that. But hopefully that'll be the first of many. Just quickly before I continue, just to save any confusion, I'm still sort of learning how to weight paint and stuff, so I don't actually animate these myself. You can actually stick them in external software. I think one's called AccuRig or Aurigs. You'll have to forgive me on the exact naming of it, but you can go and get it done automatically. I think Blender does it for you as well. But like I said, don't come to me for that one for now. Hopefully in the future I'll be able to do that because I want to start some projects myself anyway. So, but yeah, just a little heads up. Anyway, back to this. So what we're doing is just getting, once we've gotten that basic shape in, everything, like I say, it's not going to be exact. And I always say pick either the front or the side to do your main sort of sizing and positioning. Because with the drawing, it's going to be slightly off because you're not going to be 100% exact, even if you're doing it in digitally. But you pick your one, and then you do your basic, and then the next phase of that is doing details. And to do details, what I tend to do is have a picture next to me on my tablet, for example, that will have the muscle definition of either, for this, for example, it'll be female or male. And then I'll get that sort of level of detail I want. So I might, if it's a particular muscular character, I'll do every sort of muscle. After this one, I'll be doing a Hulk one, which will give that sort of good example. But for this, because she's an anime girl, it's quite quite soft, and only bare sort of minimum of muscle definition, like say the stomach coming in, not a full set of abs, but sort of that tonage on there. And that's really about it. If you honest with you, be a bit of the legs as well, cutting in and into the sort of buttocks, that sort of area. I've done feet and toes on this one, because I do tend to do sort of like a closed version, which is the YouTube version, and then I'll have on the website, I'll have a nude version usually of sort of the female characters, just because people like to have both. And I think I did the feet, if I remember rightly, because of that. I don't know if I actually used them though. I think I kept the shoes on. So in this case, I kind of wasted a bit of time. But it's, if you did do that, it's, you know, it's worth doing it. It's good practice, and you can get more sort of stuff out of it in the end. And then I'll always sort of get that base shape in and then go straight to the face, which is probably the most difficult thing you'll do when you're doing any of this, because it's quite a complex way, and it's you have to keep going out of the views, so you can't just go forward and side. You have to keep moving so it gets that proper shape. I think I did a pretty good job on this one. I made a lot of changes with the eyelashes of it, which I'll get to in a minute anyway. And I've only just gotten better over time, so future projects will look better. And like I said, I'm getting better and better as I go along. This one, I tend to have a couple of done in advanced. And this was done a couple of ones ago. So like I said, the one that I just recently did for the Valentine's Day special, that was one that I did recently, the Stripperella one. And you can see the difference sort of in the faces. I've sort of got a style now and a bit more of a general idea of how to get that the most accurate. So if you're following this tutorial as a tutorial, try to do the same exact thing I did with the eyes here, just because I've got a better way of doing it, which is I've now done in that tutorial video as I was talking about before. Like I said, if you wanted to see that, just go to the, I think it's called Female Character Tutorial. But like I said, just go on my main page and you'll see that on there, and just click on that and go from there. It's about 3 hours, but it's worth, if you want to sort of get into this, it's worth checking out and seeing what I do, because I tend to do things quite a lot different from sort of most people. I like to do things my own way. I did learn at sort of university this, but I did it the old-fashioned way, where you had to get the polygon by polygon, which takes the mick really, and you've got the sculpting, which is A, a lot more fun, and B, you can get a better outcome. The downsides are high polygon count, having a remesh, and having, if you really want to get the sort of lower quality for say a game character, you're gonna have to decimate it, which means crashing all the particles in. It'll keep the details and it will look really cool, but it will the topology will be quite rubbish. But at the end of the day, even with that, especially if you're weight painting it yourself, which weight painting is just adding the parts that move when you animate it, it's fine. But if you want to do it, it also works in the auto rig software that I was talking about. So yeah, it's not a massive issue. It's just if you want to get into, say, the field, let's say you're sort of still in school or something and you're learning how to do this, you want to do the old-fashioned way really first, because you're going to need to know topology, because most companies will only hire if you've got the correct use of topology. So yeah, for this one, I tend to get that face in and then get the sort of basic layer of color. Getting a bit of color in there helps you understand if you've got, let's say, things off or wrong. Add some shadows and some cavity, I think it's called. You go to cavity and you press world, and it will show sort of the darker areas, and you can see where you can soften things off or deepen, say, muscle mass, or soften it like I'm doing with a face here, for example. See, I've tried to keep this one as close as I can to the sort of original sculpt, because I have a sort of almost Pixar-esque sort of style, because that's the way I like to do things. It was a little bit difficult, so I'm constantly going back and forth. But like I said, recently I've sort of discovered a way of doing it better, and this is I think the second one, because I had a Christmas special where I did an anime girl, and now doing Rias on this one. But I plan on my next one project that I'm doing actually is one. I'm not going to say who it's going to be yet, but look forward for that in, say, say 2-3 months, just because I tend to do these every 2 weeks, the videos, and I've got 4 ready to go, and I'm starting the next set now. So yeah, I've got some good ones on the way. I really think, like I said, each time they get better and better. Just kind of looking for characters to do. So like I said, if you've got any suggestions, I'd love to see that in the comments. You know, even like I said as well, like, share, comment, subscribe, that sort of jazz. But like I said, as it pertains to the video, if you just got you're moving sort of things into the correct basic pose, like I said, it helps with getting those sizing, those looks correct. And it's because it's going to be an animation version in the end. And when you sort of put in even an auto rig on, you're going to need it in a pose that's quite basic and easy for the software to read. The one thing I'm hoping with this new AI stuff is that the worst thing is weight painting. Just straight out, weight painting and rigging is the worst thing you'll do in 3D. The fun bit is modeling and animating. If they had AI that could auto rig for you, that'd be like the heaven. And it's one of those jobs that you need, because if let's say I was making a game, I can model it and I can animate it, but in between weight painting, not only does it take hours to do and you can get things wrong, and if you get one piece wrong, you have to go all over it again. But if you can cut out that middleman, be a lot more effective. And it does, like, I tend to think AI should be for not to take over creativity, but help sort of on the in-betweens. And I mean that literally as well. So if you were doing an animation, you would do the keyframes, and then the AI would fill that in, or like I said, do that. But that's just a little side note. I'm sort of getting away with myself here. So after I've done that body, that's when I start doing the hair and the clothes. I tend to do hair first, just because I kind of class that almost as an extension of the body. I've said this before in previous videos. And again, with sort of anime girl hair, I've mentioned this in other videos as well. It's kind of usually, if you look at like the professional stuff from the Japanese companies, they tend to make it quite sort of flat, but that's not the way of my style. Now, I'll do, like I said before as well, I am going to try and learn how to do that properly, or teach myself to do that type of style. But as it goes at the moment, I still like the way I do it, sort of more thick and full. To me, it just seems more. I know they're trying to get that 2D look, but this is me doing 3D. I really want to make it look like it's sort of on that boundaries of realism. So that's why I try and give it that sort of percentage of a difference. But yeah, like I said, it's just most of the time it's kind of split down the middle here. So you're basically making one side with the same mesh. You just move the mesh out, remesh it every time, just to make sure you're getting that correct. And so you can move it properly, and then you're just duplicating it, mirroring it to the other side. If a character, say, has different hair, obviously you'll have to spend a little bit more time doing things. Again, it's not an issue, it just takes a little bit longer. Like, for example, here, the hair is slightly different to one side, so I've had to make a few changes. But by doing that, I've copied and pasted the original file over, and then just reshaped it. And then that little bit of hair that's coming out the top as well, I've done that separate. And again, you're constantly building it based off the reference. Sometimes it won't even exactly go to the reference, but you've just got to sort of zoom out onto the sort of main XYZ axes and just go around it and have a look to see what you think is going right or wrong. At the end of the day, there is no real right or wrong. It's the closest you can get with the skill level, or the closest you can get to the reference. Because you got to remember, for example, that's a 2D drawing, and bringing it out 3D is always going to look slightly different. Even, like I said, even those professional companies, I mean, you can watch the series, and then you go to, say, play the game, you'll notice there's always a slight difference. And that's getting as damn accurate as they can. These are the people who make the characters, for example. I tend to think, anyway, it's nice to put your little bit of own little spin on it. It's separating you from sort of the rest of them anyway as well. So you get in your own look, and it's unique, and it's something only you have. It also goes out there as well, because then people want that for, say, commissions and stuff, which, by the way, if you're watching this, I do have commissions open. So if you do want me to do a character for, say, your game project, or even just to print off, like I said, drop me a message either here or on my website, which are all under the same sort of bracket tag. It's Promethean Bryce. But like I said, I only see the website or here, because here you can put a comment, or on the website you can actually, I've got a section on contact me where you can do it just easier. But yeah, there's quite a lot going on with this here. I've tried to, say, put the red in straight away to make it easier to do. But yeah, it's a lot of work when you come into the hair. What I tend to do, if you see where those hair bits kind of point off, and you'll have noticed along the video where they go from being rounded to sort of more pointed. To do that, all you need to do is keep it with the 0.8 or something similar within that range. Nothing less than 0. I'd say 0.3 on the remesh, and then smooth it. Just hold shift and click and smooth it, and it will thin it down to smooth it off. But in doing so, it's going to make a spike. Now, if you're trying to smooth off a rounded character, that's not going to be good. But when you're doing hair, it actually works for a benefit. So sometimes the issues for one thing can actually be a benefit to others. And then I've done an eyebrow later. Usually I do the eyebrow first. I just forgot in this particular one to do it. You'll notice how the eyes I did was as a cutout method. I don't recommend doing that just because it's inefficient and it doesn't look very good in the end. I now do a way where I do it the same as I would, for example, that eyelash where I've brought it over. It works better. It looks cleaner. It takes a little bit more work, but it's worth it in the end. And then, as always, we do with the clothes. And with this, start straight with the shoes. I get the top bit where it's just more sort of organic-like. I don't know how to explain that other than organic-like. Whereas the bottom's more hard surface modeling. If you think of the sole of your foot, it's got that sort of quite tough, usually hard, angular edges. Whereas just above it's where the fabricy section is, and that's what I would call the organic more. Do that a bit first, then put, like I'm doing now, for example, then put a cube in and bend it around correctly. Shoes will always have a slight curl to them. From the heels, fine, but the front of it will curve up. That's why I sort of did that there, for example. And then you just, once you've done that, you make the ear adjustments around that. And then I'll paint them as usual. And then double check them. I mean, like I said, it might be that I do this now, and then when I've done the clothes later, I might go back and do certain sections. If you notice there, it was going flat. There's a literal tool called flatten in the sections. It's got like a sphere, half sphere, and it's flat on one side. That's how I get that. Now, with all my clothes these days, if it's tight too, like this sock, for example, I use the cutout mesh method. So if you go to the mask, excuse me, and you draw the shape of the sock, in this case, and then you extrude it, you put all the settings correct, make sure you apply that, because if not, you'll start messing up your computer. And then smoothing those edges, because they'll always be rough. But it makes you can get the exact sort of clothes. Any clothes that are tight, do that with. So any clothes skin tight or quite close to skin tight, use it. Like, for example, I'm doing this sort of underline pants here. Done the same thing. You got to use the mask, sharpen the mask, extract the mask, select it, make sure it's applied, and make sure you've extruded it between. It really depends on the size of the model in Blender. So if you have a small model, it's probably about 1 to 2. If you have a higher, bigger model, it's probably about 4 to 5. And if it's even bigger than that, sometimes I've done it myself where I've not noticed how high I've done something. You can be up to about 7. But it's all depending on how thick you want it. With these sort of anime girls, again, keep it rounded, but I've tried to at least keep that general styles. So it's usually the thinner layers of clothes. And with this pleated skirt, I've just done it a normal sphere, cut it around, made it go around as best I can, moved it with the sculpt tools, which you can do, but you just can't do massive arrangements with it. and then zoomed it in and out and made it around like that. I think that particularly looks pretty cool the way you do it like that. And then you just gotta keep moving it around until you've got the exact point. Because one of the things I say that's difficult is getting it exactly in the middle. And with this, I tried to mask paint this, but it didn't work. But there's a reason why. I didn't increase the polygon count at the time. I noticed after I did it, which was a bit silly, but that's why it goes a bit more cubey. What you really need to do is go into the settings, the edit settings, not the sculpt settings. And then you need to just press subdivide. The more subdivisions, the more faces, the more chances of painting more details. And I'll do that with the eyes later as well when I change them. But again, a top underneath it is quite skin tight. So what I've done is I've done that first bit in the same method. Then I've pulled it out a little bit more to make it look like the sort of tops coming around the sort of boob section, for example, because it's not going to be exactly tight to the skin. So it's just a case of smoothing. And then to do the collar, I've built that separately and then attached it over. I think on this one in particular, I did it two ways. I built it separate on one, the pose. On the animation version, actually, I pulled it out using the add clay tool. Either way it works. It's just I think you can get an easier, more accurate look if you do it separately and sort of boolean it together later. Yeah, so if you do want to add things together, it's easy to boolean it. Just make sure there's no. It's this method, because if you say you're making a t-shirt and you've got it as a plain and it's got holes in, you will not be able to boolean it together. It will just mess it completely up. So just adding those minor details to the shirt, which is just going to go underneath that, because then we've got the top bit over the section. Now, I tried to look into as much reference as I could for this, and I couldn't really see exactly how that sort of top section works. So I've done it my own way. I'm hoping I've got it correct, but again, if there's any fans out there, don't sort of moan at me if I've got it wrong. That's a good thing about having a client, though, as well. If you give it the best thing about having someone else review your work, like just doing it on here for YouTube, for you guys, for example, is that you get to see that second opinion. You know, where did things go wrong? And if you're doing something for a client, you can pass the file over and they'll say, oh, that top is wrong. And then I can go back and do it. But yeah, so you've just got to, like I said, you've got to use your initiative and then just be aware that you might have to make changes, which is why I always do things separate anyway. And don't join anything like the body or until you've sort of made that last 100% decision. Because that's one of the hardest things when you do this is just, like say, if you don't leave it, if you don't have a separate file with it saved, or you start joining things early, you might end up wanting to change something and it becomes impossible and you've got to completely do it again. That's why I say either have two versions, and then bring stuff back accordingly, or like I said, just leave it for now. Don't join it till you're 100% sure you're ready, which is what I've done here. Once I've done that, I've joined the body together, those legs, that to make that top, which I forgot to mention, but sometimes you have to do it earlier. But that's what you've got to do, just make sure you're ready to do it. And if you see, for example, here, it sort of curves around the bum here. Now that's inaccurate to the reference because it comes loose. But what you do is what I was trying to explain earlier, is you just make it a bit bigger and then you smooth it and use your move tool to sort of change it. But you just get in that, because it's quite close to the skin and you want it as close as possible. That's why I'd say do it like that. And then again, you've got to also put it within the skirt. It becomes a little bit difficult, but a bit time consuming, but it's worth it because you get the most accurate result out of it. Then you sort of move in, adding things in, cutting things out. If you're making a lot of changes, keep it high quality, at least for as best you can. And then when you've edited enough, you can either decimate it or reduce the polygon count. And then, like I said, painting as I go along to make sure it's correct. And then sometimes one of the annoying things about painting, I don't know if it's just Blender, because like I said, Blender's free and it's the one I can afford and it's the one I've gotten used to. But there are people out there with stuff like ZBrush. Don't know if it's the same for them, but when you paint it, because it's in the 3D space, it will sometimes knock the brush onto a different part. Just be careful of that. That's why you could sort of go base level forward. So that was black, and then you go the white afterwards. If you did white first and then try to get the black on, A, it's inefficient. B, you'd be there forever. And then for this, for example, I tried cutting it out at first. But you've got to really be, again, it's another one of those things where you've got to make sure you're correct before you do it. And then cut the section out with the mask and then smooth it off. And another thing that, again, these things, if I have to mention them because it's important, whenever you're smoothing one of these mask cutouts, they're always going to be messy. So what you want to do is smooth it, but to smooth it, it will decrease the size. So always make it, I'd say, I usually say 10 to 30% bigger than what you want it to be. So say if it goes around the shoulders, make it bigger. And then when you smooth it, it will go to the correct size. Just, again, it's a little bit of advice just to, A, speed up your time and make things better. Because otherwise, if you do it exactly as you want it to look, it will shrink it down, then it will look wrong and you'll have to pull it out or just redo it. And it's just, it's not worth it. So then I'm just adding those sort of minor touches on this one. That's there. And then you just put in the stuff on. I tend now to go back as well into these. If you have a look into the white, just to see if it's correct. Because sometimes the colors can be overpowering at times. So don't forget to do that if you need to. So you're just adding that in, and then you're just making all those small minor adjustments. Any sort of details like here. And like I said, if you go back, you can see a bit more carving, especially just go back to have it as object, but keep the shadow in that. So like I said, after you've done that, I've just, that's what I forgot to put one section in, I've just remembered. So in this video, I've just moved it across, putting that back section on. Just small things. But yeah, so we're nearly almost on the animation version. Like I said, I'll take parts away to make sure everything's correct. And then I've done that one, that's the animation version done. And then it's just now said, I thought, yep, that's correct. So I just join and smooth all of the necessary parts, make them correct. And then join them all to the body for the full version of the animation one. Again, once you've done it and you've decided that it's done, that's when you join everything and make sure every part's joined, apart from the clothes, obviously, because it goes in layers. Sometimes you can even remove the bottom section if you don't want an nude, say, version, where you won't see any of it, just because it can help the the weight painting in the end. Otherwise, you're painting layers of layers. Depends how on your level of animation. If you want it really in depth and you want those sort of bits of the top floating, you would want to keep it separate. But I just do it the way that I was taught, and that's just keeping things separate to do later. But then, like I said, after you've done that, I've ticked that off. I've gone, great, that's the animation version done. That's when I get to the pose version. So I've already pre-saved, like I said, a version where you always have to do the clothes again, but I copy and paste the clothes over. And then some cases like the skirt, for example, I'll be able to reuse it. Most cases I won't, so you have to redo it. But you're just posing it, you're moving it around, moving your fingers, making sure it's there. I've done it like the pose in the actual background on this one, so it made it a little bit easier. Not a massively in-depth pose, this one, but I quite like the way it was. So I've added my own little sort of tweak onto it. Now I moved the feet here, but I do eventually, like I said, when I said you can reuse parts, I noticed that you could reuse the actual shoes and socks, so I did that on this. It was just a case of sort of moving the sock just around a little bit, moving the hair a little bit because it's not going to be static. And then, like I said, I've moved the. If you're saving out the clothes and redoing it, you will have to repaint it. So that's the only pain in doing it this way. But it does save you time in actually remodeling the whole thing anyway, and also it keeps it sort of uniform, as it were. Forgive the pun. Where you won't need to. You've got the same look because, like I said, if you're recoloring it and marking it, you're going to be slight bits out, and you'll try and change things to the better. But again, you didn't need the feet there, so I changed it to be that way. So I ended up not needing them. And then just repainted them, like I said, afterwards. I noticed that there was no way I was going to be able to do the top from that again. So I moved sort of that. I knew I couldn't do the shirt, but I could do the outer section of the shirt because it was just a case of moving things around, like I said. So it was just a case of doing that shirt. So it was a lot. It saved me a lot of time doing this, to be fair. Because if you're doing a slight small change, you can use it. Like I said, if you know how to weight paint, you can weight paint your character and then position them in any pose you want, really. Or if you can get away with it, putting it on the T pose and using the auto rigs, just even if it's not the best, you can sort of put it in the software, do the pose, bring it back into Blender, delete the rig, but you keep the pose and you can move things around. Again, if you're coming from a world where you're sort of watching this video, you'll probably know what I'm talking about. But if you don't, again, just type the things I'm saying into Google. You'll understand. So yeah, like I said, I just had to quickly repaint everything just so it was correct. Kept that the same way it is. I was really blanking out on that day. I didn't notice that I could have just subdivided it. But like I said, I'm telling you now that you can. It really doesn't matter at the end of the day because when you print these, they'll always be whatever the color the printer is. So if it's grey, you'll have to repaint it anyway. And you're repainting it in real life, so it makes it a hell of a lot simpler and better in some ways. I'm not particularly a big fan of painting in this. I guess people can do it better. See, I was used to, back in stuff with Maya, I used to texture, but for some reason I can't get used to texturing on Blender. It's the one thing I'd say that is a lot better in a software like Maya. But yeah, like I said, I've joined it all together thinking it was correct, and then I've just, because I had to do that based on the top t-shirt anyway. Then I give a little bit of an extra smile. Like I said, sometimes I'll redo the faces, like in the last video I did Rambo. And then sometimes I don't need to. So sometimes I just sort of change the position of the eye, or slightly curve the mouth, up or down, frown or smile. So yeah, like I said, this will be the last part of this particular one. It's just the same method, like I said, doing the same thing. But as I always say at these videos, it always looks better the second time. And the only reason it looks better the second time is because once you've done it once, you realize where you went right and wrong, and then you can just continue going forward. So you can experiment more and actually get a better result, which is what I did here. See, in future videos like the stripperella one I did, for example, I would definitely cut that out and knit properly. But again, like I said, I'm still learning as I go by. So the more I do more techniques, the more I'll tell you, the less work you'll have to do. And the better result it will come over time. Each sort of character has its unique sort of bits and bobs that are good. That's why I tend to do different characters. I mean, I've done a lot of comic characters recently, but trying to vary them as much as I can. But difficult finding them. I'm just kind of, at the moment, I'm just kind of picking them out of a hat. Not literally, but just sort of out of thin air. And, I think, for example, when I did the Hawk one, I was just like, I was trying to look for a character. I was like, oh, Hawk would be good. So I just did Hawk. I've done a recent one from an actual Disney character, so that's something to look forward to. Again, I don't want to give it away to them closer. But in this one, I decided to draw the lines in because I felt like it was more part of the fabric. But then I'm just checking it over, making sure everything's done. And then, like I said, joining all the rest of the stuff again, all the hands. And then join it to the body. Personally, I think I should have had a bit better on those sort of legs and knees on this one, but I still really like the end result. But I'll show you in a minute, because once I've done this, I'll show you the turntable I've done. When you join things together, make sure they're enough apart so they don't join. If you're doing it for a print though and it's turned curved in, don't worry about it, because the printer would do the same thing anyway. It would join it together. But then, that's what I said, so I thought that was all done. So that's the last end result. I hope you really enjoyed this video. Please like, share, comment, subscribe. Look forward to all the rest stuff coming on the way. And just tell me what you think in the comments below. See you in the next one.